Hello folks, and welcome to a Wise Game video. Today we're going to be looking at 10 major additions and changes for Classic The Burning Crusade. The implements and the additions that they added to the Burning Crusade that was not part of Classic WoW Vanilla. So the information I'm going to be sharing in today's video will help those players that never experienced the game back during Vanilla and the Burning Crusade. Now, speaking for myself, the Burning Crusade was one of my favorite expansions of all time for World of Warcraft. It didn't have too much going on, and it wasn't overwhelming like the modern game is today, and it wasn't quite as basic as Classic Vanilla is. But the main addition that they added to the Burning Crusade was the PvP system that really made this game fantastic. Now, I won't be covering every addition that the Burning Crusade has to offer, but I will be going over the main ones. So let's get started with the main additions to the Burning Crusade. So number one on our list today is, of course, the new map called Outlands. Outlands is a great area that composes of 7 zones, which we gain access to via the portal in Blasted Lands at level 58, with my favorite zone being Nagrand. And then in Terakar Forest, we have the main hub called Shattered City. This is the sanctuary that they added to the Burning Crusade and the main hub for both Alliance and Horde players. This is the first time that they did make a shareable hub between both factions, with, of course, limitations depending on the faction that you play. Addition 2. The second addition I'd like to discuss in today's video is the changes when it comes to the earlier zones in the game, and that being Kalmador and the Eastern Kingdoms. The Eastern Kingdoms in Kalmador was the 2 main continents for Vanilla Classic, which we call in this day and age WoW Classic. Now, if anybody's played WoW Classic, we know that the grind when it comes to leveling up your character in Classic WoW was very slow. And for myself playing a warrior, we really had to be careful if we pulled too many mobs, because it meant instant death. So we had to play wisely, we had to take our time, and we had to really be careful. So, once they do release the Burning Crusade for Classic WoW, the areas Kalmador and the Eastern Kingdoms will receive a nerf. Meaning now, during the Burning Crusade, leveling up in the earlier zones before the Outlands would get a nerf of around 30%. Meaning now that the mobs did become a lot weaker, which meant leveling up from 1 to 58 or 1 to 60 became a lot quicker. And then once you approach level 58 and you entered the portal here and you entered the Outlands, the nerf was no longer. Meaning that level 58 to 70 became more of a grind again, with mobs becoming much stronger again. Additions and changes number 3. During Vanilla Classic, getting your first mount in the game was very expensive, and it called for level 40. With the addition of the Burning Crusade, this has been lowered. So training for riding now in the Burning Crusade got lowered to level 30. And also the cost of all this. So in Vanilla Classic, for everything, it costs you about 90 gold, depending on your reputations. In the Burning Crusade expansion, it got lowered to around 30 to 35 gold, which was a lot cheaper to obtain. Next, we're going to take a look at flying mounts. Flying mounts did come out in the Burning Crusade, but they are only used in the Outland zones. You cannot use your flying mounts in any other zone in the game. And then also keep in mind, unlike the modern game, these are not account shareable, but they are also not locked behind time gating. So in other words, pretty much it comes down to one thing. You reach that level, if you have the gold, you could start using your flying mounts. It is not tied to reputation, it is not tied to anything like that. But for us being new level 60s or say new level 70s, having this amount of gold is going to be a huge task, because one of them costs 5,000 gold, which does include the training for the mount and plus the cost of the mount to buy your first flying mount. So for alternate characters that you make later on in the game, you will have to provide that gold price again. Additions, changes, number 4. The next addition to the Burning Crusade that we're going to be looking at is Gilbanks. Classic vanilla WoW did not have Gilbanks, but the Burning Crusade introduced Gilbanks. This is a great shareable storage system shared between your guildies. And how these operate depends on how your guild master sets it up. Okay, addition and changes number 5. This is more of a change than anything because vanilla did have meeting stones, but they didn't do anything. They were pretty much just a landmark or a place where you could group up with your teammates as a starting point before entering any dungeon. But in the Burning Crusade expansion, they made it now where these actually operated. So the purpose of this, and they are again located outside of every entrance of every dungeon in the game, and also raids, is that you need yourself and one other player to be able to summon the rest of the group. So in total, you need 2 players at the meeting stone to be able to use it. Now you cannot summon the whole group with one summon. Each person has to be summoned individually. And I really enjoyed this change when it came to the Burning Crusade because riding out on a PvP server in Classic WoW to a dungeon or raid was a pain in the butt. Additions and changes number 6. The next one is PvP. Now this section right here, I'm probably going to take some time with. The reason being is because in WoW Vanilla Classic, there wasn't a lot going on, in my opinion, when it came to PvP. And what I mean by this is that basically there was only 3 battlegrounds, which after a year or 2 could get quite boring. The grind in WoW Vanilla to actually gear up through PvP was very time consuming. It took many hours per week. And the gear was not even really specifically PvP gear. It was also gear that you could use in raids. So between just having 3 battlegrounds and then world PvP, I don't really consider Vanilla Classic WoW a true PvP game. But then when the Burning Crusade surfaced, the PvP became a lot more involved, and it was the first time that they truly introduced a great PvP system to World of Warcraft. To the point that you didn't feel forced to have to do PvE in the game all the time to actually gear up for endgame. And one of the main implements that they added to change PvP in the Burning Crusade was arenas. Arenas was something that you could do each week, providing that you have an arena partner, to actually gear up and get what they call arena points per week. And then they also had arena vendors, where you could go and pick and choose the type of gear and the piece of gear that you need for that week. And this was some of the best gear that you could actually get in the Burning Crusade. And as far as the grind goes, there wasn't much of a grind when it came to arenas. Now, the best part of this is that they came out with a stat called Resilience. Resilience was a PvP only stat. It did not work in raids or PvE elements. which now truly separated the game as far as PvE and PvP. Which means to be very efficient in the game, if you did both in the game, meaning raids and arenas, you would eventually need 2 sets of gear. 1 set for PvP with resilience, and 1 set for PvE raids that did not have resilient gear. And then they also introduced a world event for PvP. It was called Hala, which is located in Nagrand, which involved Alliance fighting Horde, and whichever faction would control the flag there in the center would control that area now, which would make vendors appear where you could buy unique items in the game. And then they also added a 4th battleground to the game in the Burning Crusade called Eye of the Storm. Eye of the Storm is one of my favorite battlegrounds of all time. And then other world PvP events, and of course world PvP. So we could see now from vanilla that we now have an extra battleground, so that's 4 battlegrounds, arenas to do, plus Hala and other world PvP events. And plus my favorite part of the PvP system, having resilience PvP gear. So as the Burning Crusade Classic does surface, I will be coming out with more videos to do with the PvP system. Additions and changes number 7. Raids and dungeons. The Burning Crusade to me had some of the most unique dungeons and raids in the game, with some great mechanics and the fantastic PvE dungeon raid experience. So as we see by this huge list right here, that the Burning Crusade was not shy when it came to dungeons, which was also a great way to start gearing up your characters. And these, as always, have been run by 5-man groups. So as we could see, the Burning Crusade did add many dungeons to the game to fulfill that appetite. And then we also have awesome raids added in the Burning Crusade, with Karazhan being our first raid, and the final raid being Sunwell. Now here is an important note. For anybody who has not played the Burning Crusade in the past, you will need a flying mount to enter Tempest Keep, unless you have a Warlock for summonings and other means. Now another important thing to mention is that coming from Classic WoW Vanilla, you could do 40-man raids. However, in the Burning Crusade, they lowered this to 25-mans. So, in the Burning Crusade, you can only do 10-man raids or 25-man raids, which I think is a great change, because it's a lot easier for most guilds to get 25 people together versus 40 people. Additions and changes number 8. Now this one's more of a change. I wasn't going to get into this in today's video, but I figured, why not? This is a class change for spellcasters AoEs, and especially the Mage. The Mage was a very strong class in Vanilla Classic. They could literally clear out a whole camper area of mobs in seconds flat. All they had to do was slow them or frost them down and then blast them with their frost AoE, as we see right here. So this is a 60 mage that's helping carry my warrior to level him up a bit, and we could see he's doing all the work. That's how powerful this ability actually was. But in the Burning Crusade, they're going to add a nerf to this kind of ability. And there's a bit of a mathematical formula that follows suit here, which I'm not really going to get into in today's video. So you may want to look this up, seeing I don't have a class with these kind of abilities, to find out how actually this all works. But I will give you a bit of an idea. Say if you pull more than 10 mobs now, say on a mage in the Burning Crusade, it's going to get nerfed now, your AoE, by say 5 to 10%. So basically, the more mobs you pull, the weaker your AoE becomes. Whereas in Vanilla Classic, there was no nerf taking place at all. Additions and Changes number 9. In the Burning Crusade, there was changes to races and classes in the game, with the two main additions being Draenei for the Alliance and Blood Elves for the Horde, with the changes and additions to also two classes in the game, the Shaman and the Paladin. So in Vanilla Classic, Horde was the only faction that was able to roll a Shaman, and the Alliance was the only faction that was able to roll a Paladin. But now in the Burning Crusade, both Shamans and Paladins are now accessible by playing both factions, which to me is an awesome addition. Now, as we see right here, the Draenei is the only race in the game for the Alliance that can actually play a Shaman. And then as we see for the Horde, the Blood Elves are the only race that can play the Paladin. So now we have more options going into the Burning Crusade. Additions and Changes number 10. Okay, and this section is going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to wrap up today's video by talking about a few implements in section 10, not to make the video too long. So the first one we're going to be looking at right here is a new profession that got added to the Burning Crusade called Jewel Crafting. Jewel crafters could craft rings, trinkets, and the most important thing is what they call gems. In the Burning Crusade, they have sockets on certain particular pieces of gear, high-end gear, PvP, and raid gear, which has sockets in them. And in these sockets, you can make, as a jewel crafter, gems to add additional powers to your piece of gear. So with these gems, you could add more numbers when it comes to strength, agility, intel, and even PvP resilience, which is going to be a very high in demand profession for the Burning Crusade. Now next we're going to talk a little bit about heroic dungeons and the emblem system. In the Burning Crusade, they did come out with heroic dungeons. So basically what a heroic dungeon is that it's a dungeon that's higher difficulty than a regular dungeon. The bosses and the mobs in that heroic will be stronger, meaning once you complete that heroic, you should be able to get better rewards. And one of these is an emblem system called the Badge of Justice. The Badge of Justice is another form of currency that you could collect doing raids and heroics in the Burning Crusade, which is going to give you an extra option now besides just lucky drops and loot from the boss fights. So as you continue doing raids and heroics in the game, these are going to keep building up, and then you're going to be able to go to a particular vendor in the game, hand them in, and be able to buy a piece of gear. So there we are, folks. There's the top 10, plus a few more, of the main additions and changes for the Burning Crusade Classic. Now, I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of my feelings when it comes to the Burning Crusade. The Burning Crusade, to me, was one of the most exciting and awesome expansions of all time to do with World of Warcraft. It had a great PvP system, they introduced arenas, they gave us specific PvP pieces of gear with a stat called Resilience, which kind of evened things out, but gave an upper hand to PvPers that worked hard in PvP elements, as it should be. The raids and the dungeons were also some of the best raids and dungeons I ever ran, and I am not a huge PvE fan, but the Burning Crusade has a lot to offer. But one of the main things I love about the Burning Crusade was that it cut RNG. And what I mean by this is that it gave us currencies. So it gave us a guaranteed way, if we worked hard at endgame, to get PvP gear and also PvE gear without luck of the draw. And that being honor points, arena points, and then the emblem system called Badge of Justice. The zones of the Burning Crusade was breathtaking. with the first expansion to introduce flying mounts, a great storage system for Gilbanks, and a summoning system that they added in the game, which made it where we could get this particular areas, dungeons, and raids in the game almost instantly. And also 2 great classes that was added during the Burning Crusade, the Draenei for the Alliance and the Blood Elves for the Horde. And not to mention the 2 classes that are now accessible and playable on both factions, the Paladin and the Shaman. I know this was a pretty lengthy video, but you could see that we had a lot to cover here. So if you are a brand new player to the Burning Crusade or a returning player from years ago, hopefully this is a nice refresher to help you get started with the Burning Crusade Classic. I will be coming out with more videos once the Burning Crusade Classic does get released. There is no date yet posted, so keep that in mind. I will also add to the link of this video the video that I made how to opt in for beta if you're interested in beta testing for the Burning Crusade Classic. So as always, thank you for stopping by and checking out Wise Gamer. Feel free to sub up for more cool videos coming your way, and comment down below because as always we love to hear from you. And don't forget to ring that bell. Until the next time, you guys have yourself a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.